Rabies and germs, welcome to Ever Dafter, a new segment on Reader's Digested and YouTube, where I'll have the opportunity to talk about all things horror and horror-related. The mission statement of Ever Dafter is to shine a light on obscure or brand new content. This is not to say I won't throw in some classics every now and again, but really what I want to do is take content that otherwise might not be seen and offer it whatever attention I can. Obviously, I am only starting out on this platform, and ReadersDigested.com is less than a year in, so I don't exactly have the Midas touch, so to speak, but at least I can pride myself on offering thoughtful opinion and criticism about the content making the rounds, so to speak. Later on, I would love to do reviews of novels and video games, as well as graphic novels, along with whatever else I can think of. But for now, I'm focusing on content that has either not caught your attention or you were on the fence about. Because really, I can't tell you how many times I've been browsing Netflix, HBO Max, Vudu, Tubi TV, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Peacock, or the millions of other streams, and spent hours and hours trying to find something to watch, and then went to bed. I think that's because we have so much content at our disposal, it is a lot harder to infer what is worthwhile and what is not. Sometimes you can only base your impression on the cover you see on the screen, and oftentimes that does not shine the best light on the film. With Ever Dafter, I hope to wade through and find the gems on your behalf. And remember, everything I say is always from a place of love and is always a celebration of the genre and the artistry behind it. Enjoy. In a way, I feel The Good Exorcist and director Josh Stifter are a significant element of ReadersDigested.com, at least in terms of its inception. My brother Scott Moore and I had been participating in Comic Cons and other activities throughout last year, but I've always wanted to substantiate some level of growth on the internet. I will always have a special place in my heart for the years I spent on message boards and that sense of community, which I have never been able to capture anything close to since. This year is now, of course, infamous for the coronavirus outbreak, and as a result, I had a lot of spare time to myself. Like many of you, I was not as productive as I wish I would have been, perplexed by the whole ordeal, but I did ultimately create and develop Reader's Digested in the time allotted to me. After noticing Josh Stifter was a filmmaker who was following me on Twitter, I shot him a message inquiring about an interview. I did not know if he was actively following me on Twitter or if he was someone who was following me in response to, the networking and fillers I had sent out to try and get people's attention. For instance, Julia Cato, the voice actress who plays Kimmy and Chucky's mom on Rugrats, is following me, and I have no idea why. But I digress. Josh, however, was receptive and, in general, came off like a pretty nice guy, agreeing to do an interview with me and even offering a screener to his horror film The Good Exorcist free of charge. I ended up buying a digital copy of the film as a way to show my support. However, those curious can watch the film on the Tubi TV streaming service. Josh agreeing to do an interview gave me the confidence to interview directors like Gregory Plotkin, who directed Hellfest, Wolf Cop director Lowell Dean, the director of the Hell House series, Stephen Cognetti, and even my childhood hero, Robert Englund. The Good Exorcist cast comprises itself of Daniel Degnan, Brittany Ortiz, and Avery Merrifield, among others, and was involved in a television series called Rebel Without a Crew. For the uninitiated, Rebel Without a Crew is a program on the El Rey network created by Robert Rodriguez. In 1992, you see, Robert Rodriguez directed the first film of his Mexico trilogy, called El Mariachi, and did so with a budget of only $7,000. Thus, the idea behind the Rebel Without a Crew series was for other filmmakers to create a film for the same budget in a 2-week period. Robert Rodriguez went on to direct films like Sin City and Alita, as well as the modern art house classic series Spy Kids. All caught up? Fantastic. The film is filled to the brim of Robert Rodriguez's influence, whether it be an exorcist named Father Trejo, a reference to Danny Trejo, who portrayed the titular role in the film Machete, or Brittany Ortiz's character donning an eye patch, akin to Michelle Rodriguez's performance in the same film. The aesthetic and special effects of The Good Exorcist in general are stylized in the Grindhouse genre, a genre that may put off many of you. I can understand that. The horror genre is popular among early filmmakers because of how accessible it is and how often it can be pursued on a shoestring budget. Thus, they exploit the age-old philosophy of the unknown and what's not seen serving as more important than what it is. The Grindhouse genre, however, is rarely like that. Instead, it attempts grandiose spectacle in spite of not having the financial means or resources to do it in a way that general audiences are accustomed to. Whether the result is win, lose, or draw, you can only hope that if it misses and amounts to a garbage fire, it is at least an entertaining one. The Good Exorcist, and at the very least, the film Josh Stifter ended up making, is a good fit for the Grindhouse genre. There is a nervous energy and excitement that pulsates through it, whether it be from the boisterous score, comprised of loud instruments, or the crude opening credits. This is a film that is unabashedly problematic, And I mean that as both a criticism and a compliment. Whichever way you decide to take it will depend on your awareness and stance on the genre itself. The concept of The Good Exorcist is simple and straightforward enough. This is something I would actually consider as an important takeaway, I think, or at least it would be if I were trying to persuade or dissuade myself from watching it in hindsight. Something I feel often is lost on a lot of storytellers, especially ones who are either inexperienced or trying a new medium, is they are swept away by other fundamentals, and don't remember the focus on basic structure. In other words, if you don't have a lot of resources and you don't have a lot of time to polish and fine-tune your script, then you have to have a level of discipline and know when to reel it back. Don't try to make Memento if you won't be able to provide the proper attention to detail that is required. Father Gill is a disillusioned, wandering priest that finds himself at a ranch where a mysterious demonic presence has made itself known. He now tasks himself with dispelling the ranch of the evil entity. Although there are other nuances and character development sprinkled in, that is more or less The Good Exorcist. Daniel Degnan dons the cloth as our story's main protagonist and does particularly well. Actor is likable and charming, and does so without coming off as overbearing or overstated. The character is comparable in some respects to Ash from The Evil Dead, a series I think this film would likely fall in the same ilk as, especially the series later on. His character is absolutely my favorite aspect from the film, with the occasional one-liner and simple readiness as the frontman for the film. The rest of the characters and actors involved can be hit or miss, but none of them are what I would call egregious in their portrayals. Brittany Ortiz does well with what she's given, although I would say the character does not feel very realized, and thus her turns from decency to a more sarcastic, in-your-face type can feel a little abrupt. I feel like I would have liked to have seen more with her character and Father Gill, as they are the more distinctive moments of the film in my opinion. The remainder are competent and decent, and at worst, feel like they're not too experienced being in front of a camera. The Stanley character stands out in particular as a character I did not care for, not necessarily because of the portrayal, but because of the character itself feeling a little too cringe-inducing, offering comic relief and disruption to a film that is already inherently a disruptive comedy. Towards the end, when the Stanley character was called upon to be serious, I found that the delivery was actually on point, but the character itself felt too damaged to be taken seriously. On occasion, I did feel like this film could have shaved off a handful of segments and expanded on others, and that would have made for a better streamlined feature. Obviously, I understand that with time constraints and limited resources, that can't always happen. I think you could argue the film has a certain origin story quality to it that hinders it in some ways, like when the Spider-Man films were being rebooted with Tom Holland, no one wanted to see another origin story, and instead wanted to go ahead and skip to Spider-Man being Spider-Man. Although the film is not exactly the origin of Father Gill per se, it is the establishing of a new lineup of characters and their dynamic, and by the end, does very much feel like the start of something. Personally, I could not help but feel like I was more interested in what came to be by the end of The Good Exorcist, and what would happen next, than what I was with the film I had watched. As I prefaced, The Good Exorcist was shot for an unsubstantial amount of money, but I was pleasantly surprised to discover decent production value and cinematography, mostly across the board. That's one of the real fears I always have when I watch an independent film, especially the lower budget you go, that the visual integrity will be compromised as a result. Worse is if the filmmaker tries to overcompensate or disguise it through novelties like making it found footage or a mockumentary. This film's camera work looks good though, and in fact has some inspired shots to boot. Not only that, but through the incorporation of animation and other stylistic decisions, it really does help conjure up a unique flavor for the film. I have heard the director complain at his own expense about the sound work, something to do with his sound guy doing an abysmal job and him having to redo it altogether. Particularly, I like how the musical component always feels thematically present to the film's subject material. The film clearly took to heavy metal, allowing itself a distinct vibe, and when it is not doing that, it has a very classic score. On the other hand, there are instances where there is an echo quality to certain scenes, and other times as well, background noise is present in one person's dialogue, and then it goes dead silent for the next person's. The acoustics of a room can also make it for a jarring, faraway quality to certain characters' speech. As you would imagine, The Good Exorcist is rough around the edges, met with detriment by things I have mentioned and things I chose to overlook, but it does have its charm and warmer qualities as well. Clearly, the filmmaker is inspired and enthusiastic, and I believe that shows in the film itself. Father Gill is a likable leading man, and as I said, I was curious for what would happen next for them. A lot of the flaws are from circumstance and are not mistakes I believe would have flown had it not been a Rebel Without a Crew film, and had it been given more time under the hood. For a general moviegoer, that won't hold any weight, but for me, and I think for many of you, I think it is important to mention that even the moments I didn't like, I thought to myself, I look forward to seeing how they improve on that as a sequel. The Good Exorcist was a fun film to start. As I mentioned, I did an interview with Josh Stiffer a few months ago back on Reader's Digested. You can check that out in the link added to the description. As for Reader's Digested, we are currently developing an anthology novel series aptly named Rabies and Germs, and are enthusiastically searching for contributors who might be interested. Thus far, Scott Moore has written a novelette that will be included, and I am well into a novelette of my own. We have a handful of other busy hands as well that we will be able to announce shortly. If you or someone you know are interested, you can reach me through Twitter by sending me a direct message or contact me through email. Information, as always, is in the description. As I read this, I'm actually in quarantine, having been in contact with several family members who now have COVID-19, which, unless I get it and die, means years later this will serve as an interesting time capsule for this very strange, peculiar year. Thanks for joining, Air Fives and Hazmat Hugs all around, and I will see you next time.